One of the benefits of being set in an alternate universe is that the writers of the Absolute comics can play around with established events from the mainline universe and see how it might have turned out if things went differently. And this latest issue of Absolute Batman clearly riffs on a very famous Batman story, A Death in the Family. But before I get to that, remember that every issue is somebody's first, so let's briefly bring everyone up to speed. In the Absolute universe, Bruce Wayne is an everyday working-class engineer who puts on a costume to combat Gotham's corrupt elite. But his entire crusade, along with every single tragedy in his life, turned out to be a sick, calculated joke orchestrated by billionaire psychopath Jack Grimm, aka the Joker. This version is not your usual Joker. He's been alive for possibly centuries, and he seems to sustain himself by draining the blood of infants. As such, he constructs lengthy games to entertain himself, treating normal people like pawns. His current obsession is Batman, who he claims to have created by arranging for the murder of his father at Gotham Zoo in a mass shooting. Since then, he used Bane to brutally mutilate Batman's childhood friends, the Crime Alley Kids, and turned Waylon Jones into an alligator monster in his Arkham facility. To make matters worse, Grimm unleashed Scarecrow, whose fear toxin drove Jim Gordon to jump off of a building to his death, leaving Batman framed for the tragedy in front of a horrified city. When a grieving, isolated Batman doubled down on his crusade, Grimm played his next card, the Robins. They are a team of tech-geared, highly trained prodigies, Dick Grayson, Jason Todd, Tim Drake, Duke Thomas and Stephanie Brown, led by General Slade Wilson. And they ambushed Batman in a 5-on-1 assault and dropped a skyscraper on top of him. Batman was only saved when Harley Quinn and Alfred unleashed a swarm of bat drones to jam their tech and drag a wounded Batman to safety. While on the run, Harley dropped a massive bomb of her own. She's actually Jack Grimm's daughter, raised in the shadow of the horrifying Arkham facility before escaping to start the Red Hood movement. But Batman didn't want to hear it. He wasn't interested in making connections with people. All he cares about is his mission. Harley warned Batman that Grimm feeds on fear, lies, and psychological control, which made Scarecrow's next move all the more sinister. Scarecrow contacted Batman and claimed that his father, Thomas Wayne, was really being kept alive as a prisoner. Desperate for answers, Batman went to his father's grave and dug it up only to find the coffin completely empty. And meanwhile, Grimm unleashed his next Arkham resident, Basil Karlo. Now, what I find interesting about this Clayface is that Snyder and Dragotta really lean into the idea of Clayface being a sculptor. In the mainline comics and most adaptations, he's a tragic figure and former actor who is tormented. But here, Clayface seems relatively calm. He has several sets of hands that come out from his puddling clay flesh to form his shape, and I quite like how his default head looks like a broken ceramic mask. It's a nice touch. Now, the issue itself opens with a more delicate pace as Alfred gets a coffee with his daughter Julia. He tries to explain why he's been such an absent father, but Julia has heard it all before. Although this time, rather than getting angry with him, as she has done in the past, she calmly lays out some home truths on him. For all the time he has spent trying to save the world, what difference has he actually made aside from damaging his relationship with her? What's more, while he's been busy swinging at phantoms, as she puts it, all he's done is hurt those closest to him. Now, this scene is obviously here to set up the parallel with Batman, who has discarded everyone he ever cared for in order to keep them safe and allow him to focus on his mission. In the next scene, Waylon and the other Crime Alley kids come to Batman's hideout to try and reason with him. Oswald clearly still resents him, although I suppose he always has been a little crass, but Waylon has persuaded the others to give Batman a chance. But he's not interested in their help. All he wants to do is focus on the mystery in front of him. He is utterly convinced that he's ensnared in some grand conspiracy worked out to the finest detail. He tells his friends how they all had benefited from Grimm's shell companies somehow, whether they knew it or not, and even points to where they were all standing when the zoo massacre happened in their childhood. Waylon was standing by the croc pit, Oz was facing the penguin enclosure, Eddie was hanging out with the smartest animals, the monkeys, and Harvey was by the rams, the sacrificial favourite of the Roman god Janus. This is proof that it has all been planned. And you know it's bad when the Riddler chimes in and says that you're stretching. By this point, Batman is practically foaming at the mouth. Perhaps his childhood friends had been in on it from the start. Maybe they're secretly against him and are working for Grimm. But they're deeply offended by the mere suggestion that they're anything but his dearest friends. And this is when Alfred brings in another person to act as the voice of reason, Batman's mother, Martha. You'll recall how Scarecrow said that Batman's whole life had been part of a joke to get back at Martha, who is involved with the secretive Court of Owls. And she's not at all surprised that her son is Batman. Apparently Jim Gordon had written to her when he found out, but she wants him to step back, take a breath, and see reason. Grimm is a liar who benefits from turning people against each other. Nothing he says can be believed. His father is dead, and he must accept that. But he refuses. He wants to know all about the Court of Owls because he believes that's the final clue that'll help him find his father, but Martha refuses to talk. So, Batman does what he does best. He puts on his cowl and goes full Batman mode, punching the wall around Martha, demanding that she talks or else. Now, of course, this horrifies everyone else in the room. Even the Riddler tries to hold him back, so you know it's bad. But Alfred has to intervene by shooting him with a stun gun. Realizing how far he's gone, Batman slinks off in shame. Now, what he does next may prove to be one of the biggest mistakes of his career to date, and that says a lot considering some of the blunders he has made. There are clearly some fractures in the relationship between the Robins, where Dick Grayson is more calm and measured, Jason Todd is persistent and a little bloodthirsty. After a full day of patrolling, Dick is ready to call it a night, but Jason wants to go out again. The others tend to agree with Dick, so Jason heads out alone. There had been a reported sighting of someone who may be Batman wandering around in public carrying a massive battle axe, so Jason goes to investigate, and he finds Batman waiting for him. But Batman says he's not there to fight, he just wants to talk. Jason won't have any of that though, and instead he ensnares Batman. And while he's busy celebrating, Tim arrives, and they decide to call Dick to gloat. What they can't see, however, is that Clayface has arrived and he takes the form of Batman. And not just any Batman, it's an even more hulking and brutal Batman, almost like a caricature. It reminds me a little of what Batman looked like when he used Venom, just without the glowing green eyes. And unlike Batman, Clayface is not playing nice. He smothers the two Robins, cruelly mimicking Batman's words, almost turning them back on him in a "I know you are, but what am I" kind of way. But Clayface has no intention of quietly killing both of the Robins. He has to make a scene of it. So he impales Tim Drake and throws him to the ground, killing him, and leaves Jason unconscious. And I have to assume that this was intentional. Earlier in the issue, the Robins discussed public polls of who was the best Robin, and Tim came out on top. What better way to harm Batman's reputation than to make people think he had killed the beloved Robin? And I particularly like the panel that is a direct callback to A Death in the Family with Batman cradling the dead Robin, although I am noticing a recurring pattern in these Absolute books. It's very clear that this line is building towards something, likely the Absolute Crisis, and Scott Snyder has talked about how they've planned out the first major arc of these books, and it's clear that the people working on these comics are really enthusiastic and full of ideas, but as a consequence they have to cram in as much as they can in order to maintain progress towards the checkpoint. As such, it sometimes feels like characters are introduced and or killed off at a rapid pace. When Commissioner Gordon committed suicide, that felt impactful because he'd been part of the story since day one. Tim Drake had only been around for a few issues, and as such his death isn't as impactful on the reader, or at least not to me, and I don't think it will be for others either. Regardless, they are burning through characters in these books right now. It probably won't be an issue, but I'm cautious of their deaths starting to feel a little cheap. But to continue what happens in the story, Jason had been unconscious, so Batman and Clayface fight. And it's clear that Clayface is just toying with Batman, trying to break his spirit. He's playing his role in Grimm's little story, quite obviously. When Batman tells Clayface that he should have taken him instead of the boy, Clayface retorts that he is taking him, just in a different way. Everything he's doing is to ruin Batman's reputation, to isolate him and to weaken him. And I know I described Clayface's dialogue as a form of "I know you are, but what am I?" but I like how he takes Batman's own words and turns them back against him. As Clayface slinks off down a storm drain, Batman tells him he doesn't get to leave, and Clayface responds, "No, you don't get to leave, ever," making it clear that he's Grimm's plaything. As if on cue, Scarecrow arrives to mock Batman just as Jason wakes up. He assumes that Batman has killed Tim and vows revenge. And this is where Scott Snyder flips A Death in the Family on its head in the most sinister way possible. In the mainline comics, Jason Todd's death broke Batman. But in this story, Tim Drake, the city's favourite Robin, is the one that's murdered, while Jason is left alive, enraged, and completely convinced that Batman is a monster. Jack Grimm continues his psychological game, and he's bound to be laughing somewhere. Batman pushed the crime alley kids, his mother and Alfred, away out of paranoia and a desperate need for control. But now Grimm has used that isolation against him, using Clayface to frame Batman for the murder of a hero in front of the one Robin most prone to extreme violence. And I don't think this is going to end very well for anyone. But what did you think of issue 23? Do you like the twisted remix of A Death in the Family, or do you agree that burning through characters like Tim Drake so quickly risks making these big deaths feel a little cheap? Special thanks as ever to my channel members, the Back Issue Brigade. If you'd like to see your name on screen in my future videos and get access to some exclusive videos, then join the channel now. I'll be back shortly with videos about Clayface Celebrity Dirt 2 and Barbara Gordon Breakout 4. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next one.